I'd like to begin this story by talking about my decision process when it came to picking a seminary to attend in the first place. And like most people, I developed a pro-con list to weigh the advantages and disadvantages of attending one school over the other. And eventually my list came down to two institutions. The first being Union Theological Seminary in Richmond, Virginia, and Regent University in Virginia Beach. And I decided to go with Regent primarily because my life in terms of family and friends and being plugged into the church is here in Norfolk. And I felt that it was just simply too much to uproot all of that simply to attend Union. And that decision, of course, came with a notable disadvantage in that Regent does not have a Presbyterian-centric curriculum, and that I would be on my own to learn the Presbyterian ways of the force, so to speak. And I found that this actually was a great benefit to me in the long run because I was able to develop a vocabulary to communicate what it means to be a Presbyterian to non-Presbyterians in a way that did not assume any Presbyterian jargon. Because I think, just to be honest, even the word presbyter itself is kind of a head scratcher when you're talking to non-Presbyterians. And so the student body at Regent, non-denominational as it is really more representative of the Pentecostal, evangelical, and charismatic traditions. And so while we could see eye to eye in terms of our mutual Protestantism, the major distinctiveness and earmarks and hallmarks of the Presbyterian denomination and other denominations I found was best communicated and articulated by simply discussing polity points. And these polity points would, of course, open the door to other conversations. But I would often begin simply with this brief definition of what it means to be a Presbyterian. So I would say to be a Presbyterian is to affirm a council-centered leadership, and that these councils are made up of elected representatives from within a congregation, and that these representatives are called elders, and that these elders convene on a regular basis to deliberate and make decisions for the church by a majority vote rule. And I found that definition, 99% of the time, tended to satisfy most customers. It would articulate exactly what it means to be a Presbyterian without getting into really anything else. However, for that 1%, I would often find when interacting with a Congregationalist, so to speak, or Baptist, that they would push back a little bit and they would say, well, we decide things by vote too. So what's the difference between our denomination and yours? And so I would reply and I would say, well, our councils are arranged in a system that works together in a hierarchy of sorts that we have different terms for. So internally within the church, we call this the session. And then the next council above that is at the local level, and that is between multiple churches and multiple cities. We call that the presbytery. And then the level above that is between or across multiple states, and we call this the synod. And then the level above that is the national one, which we call the General Assembly. And the decisions made by each of those councils are meant to work in a unified manner to provide checks and balances with each other. And this is, I've found, is kind of the central defining aspect of what separates Presbyterian polity from a Congregationalist polity, wherein every single church member has a vote, and that within a Congregationalist or Baptist church, that church congregation is relatively autonomous in terms of making decisions for itself, that there is no supervening authority over that church. And after explaining these polity points, this, of course, would bring up theological discussions about inherent authority and how that authority is derived from the Bible. And I don't want to belabor that discussion too much, but I think just to speak on it briefly before I close, I would point out the fact that as a Presbyterian, I reject the installation of Peter as the head of the church. Not because I dislike Peter. I mean, I love Peter. He's one of my favorite disciples, right? But I think the fact that Peter's installation as the first pope, as it were, and the papal succession that followed him is a form of authority that is not really conducive for the flourishing of the church body. And I don't say that to rock the boat. That's just, and I don't say that really to disparage my Catholic brothers and sisters, I should say, but rather that I am hesitant to assent to a system of church polity that really puts individuals first in terms of authority, and that can translate to any number of denominations that have bishops or priests or anybody with a leader that is running and administering a church alone, and that there is nobody and nothing above that person. Or if there are, it creates this system of individuals and a chain that can break. And I think we've seen that recently with a number of church scandals where we have these big non-denominational churches and the leadership collapses. And well, what happens after that? Well, there's no supervening authority to come in and make things right. And these churches, when the leadership collapses, the congregation collapses too. It's just this huge implosion and a schism, and that congregation breaks up into multiple churches and so on and so forth. So again, I don't want to turn this into a big discussion, but really the point is, I think by being at Regent, I was able to find a voice to speak Presbyterian to non-Presbyterians, and that would be centered on polity mainly, and then that polity would help me discuss other theological commitments such as authority and so forth. And so I hope that if you're a non-Presbyterian watching this, that you got something out of my explanations here, and that if you find yourself thinking, I wonder what it would be like to be a Presbyterian, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to discuss more things with you. But as just to bring this video to a close, I just wanted to say that that God loves you, and that I hope you have a great day, and take care. Bye-bye.